They thought no one was watching. On the back road outside Hollow Bend, 3 men laughed as they dragged a girl through the dirt like she was less than human. But the road remembers everything, and that night, 20 Hell's Angels sat 20 yards away, engines silent, eyes burning beneath chrome and justice. Before we start this story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Also, please subscribe to the channel. It will help us to bring you more inspiring stories every day. The town of Hollow Bend wasn't on most maps anymore. Just an old gas station, 2 rusted silos, and a dirt road that wound between cornfields like a scar. Lara Jennings, 19, worked shifts at the feed store and dreamed of leaving. But that night, dreams meant nothing. She'd refused to cover for Bobby Crane, the boss's son who thought no was a challenge. His revenge came with headlights and laughter. When his truck pulled beside her on that road, she knew what was coming. They yanked her from her bike, boots scraping gravel, fists slamming into ribs that had never known violence. "Teach her some manners," Bobby sneered. The men dragged her through mud beside the ditch, their laughter thick and cruel. But what they didn't know, what the road kept secret, was that a group of riders had parked just beyond the ridge, engines off, watching through the dusk. The Hells Angels of Iron Valley didn't look for trouble. But when they saw it, they finished it. Their leader, Wyatt Reverend Cole, leaned on his Harley, arms crossed, jaw set like stone. The youngest among them, Ghost, nudged him. "You seeing what I'm seeing?" Reverend's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, looks like God left early tonight." He nodded once, and every man in that circle understood. They'd seen this kind of cruelty before. Cowards who hid behind laughter and liquor. Reverend's boots hit the ground first, slow and heavy, every step echoing the promise of consequence. The others followed, 20 black vests flickering under the moonlight, patches catching the glow. Hell's Angels, Iron Valley chapter. Down by the ditch, Bobby was too busy taunting Clara to notice the ground vibrating under his feet. "You think you're better than me?" he jeered, kicking mud toward her face. She didn't answer. She just stared past him, eyes fixed on something behind him. For a second, he thought she'd broken. Then he turned and froze. The road wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with silent, waiting steel. The first sound was the click of Wyatt's boot heel on gravel. Not loud, but final. "Let her go," he said, voice calm, too calm. Bobby blinked, confusion replacing bravado. "Who the hell are you?" Wyatt didn't answer. He just kept walking. Behind him, 20 riders fanned out, their shadows stretching across the dirt like a moving wall. Bobby's 2 friends dropped her wrist instantly. "We were just messing around," one muttered. Wyatt's lip curled. "Yeah? Looks like she ain't laughing." He stopped 2 feet from Bobby, close enough for the stench of whiskey and arrogance to hit. "You touch her again, you won't walk home." Bobby puffed out his chest, trying to find courage he didn't have. "You can't tell me what to—" Wyatt's fist cut the sentence in half. It wasn't rage. It was judgment. Bobby hit the ground, choking on dust. Wyatt turned, crouching near Clara. "You hurt bad?" he asked. She shook her head, trembling. "Just scared." "Good," he said softly. "Fear means you're still alive." The other angels stood like statues, their presence alone keeping Bobby's men frozen. Tank, a broad man with a snake tattoo curling up his neck, grabbed one of the abusers by the collar. "You like dragging people? Try dragging asphalt," he growled, tossing him into the dirt road. Ghost kicked Bobby's boot toward him. "Get up. Let's see how big you are without backup." Bobby scrambled to his knees, mud streaking his face. "You're dead, all of you. My old man runs this town." Reverend's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Then tell him the road runs us." He motioned to Ghost. "Get her out of here." Ghost knelt beside Clara, his voice softer than his reputation. "You're safe now, kid." She hesitated, tears mixing with dust. "Why are you helping me?" Ghost's answer came without hesitation. Because nobody helped my sister when they could have. Wyatt glanced toward the road, the faint hum of engines returning. We ain't done here, he said. We'll deal with the trash later. First we take her home. They rode slow, not for show, but for her. Clara sat in the sidecar of Reverend's Harley, clutching the borrowed leather jacket tight around her. The stars hung low, the fields glowing under moonlight. For the first time all night she breathed without flinching. The convoy of 20 bikers stretched behind her, silent but steady, an iron promise guarding her every mile. When they reached town, Wyatt didn't stop at her small trailer on Ridgeway Street. He stopped at the Roost, the Angels Clubhouse, a repurposed fire station painted matte black. "Why here?" she asked, voice small. "'Cause your house is the first place that coward'll look," Wyatt replied. Inside, the smell of oil and coffee mixed with smoke and trust. One of the bikers, Rooster, handed Clara a clean towel. "You're safe now," he said. "And tomorrow you get to choose what happens next." She looked around the room. These men, strangers, rough and scarred, and for the first time in years, she believed him. By morning, the clubhouse stirred with the hum of discipline. No one joked. No one revved an engine for show. 20 men moved with quiet purpose, checking chains, tightening bolts, loading saddlebags with fuel and resolve. Reverend stood at the map table, the veins in his hands taut. "Bobby Crane's daddy owns half of Hollow Bend," Tank muttered. "You really want that heat?" Wyatt looked up, eyes calm, unreadable. "Heat's fine. We've ridden through worse. But a man who lets his son hurt a woman needs to learn what it's like to be seen." Across the room, Clara watched, wearing a clean hoodie that swallowed her small frame. Ghost crouched beside her, tightening her borrowed boots. "You don't owe us thanks," he said. "Just live. That's payback enough." But Clara wasn't thinking about thanks. She was thinking about the night before, about the eyes behind those helmets, the silence that had felt safer than words. She'd spent years being invisible. Now she was surrounded by men who saw everything, and it terrified and comforted her both. That afternoon, the Angels rolled into town, not roaring through like outlaws, but gliding slow and deliberate down Main Street. People peeked from behind blinds. They'd heard stories about these men, stories that painted them in shades of danger. But what they saw that day wasn't chaos. It was order with a heartbeat. Reverend stopped his Harley right in front of the Crane feed store. Bobby's father, Gerald Crane, stood by the porch, cigar clamped between yellowed teeth. "You got business here?" he asked, half smirking. "Yeah," Wyatt said, dismounting. "We do." He nodded to Ghost, who held up a small folded paper, Clara's hospital report. Broken ribs, bruises, pictures of mud and blood under moonlight. Gerald's smirk faltered. "You're gonna ruin a boy's future over some tramp?" The silence that followed was deadly. Wyatt took a slow step forward. "That tramp is the only one in this town still standing on truth." His voice dropped to a low growl. "You think your money buys silence? We ride louder than that, and in that moment, Hollow Bend remembered what justice looked like." Gerald's hands trembled as he pointed at Wyatt. "You're threatening me in front of witnesses." Wyatt didn't blink. "No, sir. I'm reminding you your boy's not above the road." Tank stepped forward, setting down a manila envelope. Inside were statements. Neighbors who'd seen Clara dragged, a cashier who'd heard Bobby bragging at the bar. Proof. Gerald stared, pale. "How'd you get all this?" "People talk," Wyatt said. "When someone finally listens." The tension cracked like dry wood. Gerald's cigar dropped into the dust. "You'll regret this," he said weakly. Wyatt leaned close enough for his voice to feel like thunder. "We don't do regret. We do right." He turned, signaling the crew. The Angels mounted their bikes again, not rushing, not hiding. The engines fired as one, echoing off storefronts and silence. Clara watched from the truck nearby, gripping the seat. For the first time, the noise didn't scare her. It steadied her. Power didn't have to come from cruelty. It could come from conviction, from chrome and spine, from men who'd lived long enough to know which fights matter. Later that evening, the angels gathered by the quarry, a quiet stretch of land outside town, where the sound of engines echoed against rock walls like heartbeats. The air smelled of dust and gasoline, the kind of scent that carried memory. Lara sat near the fire pit, staring into the flames. Wyatt handed her a small tin cup of water. "You did good," he said. She looked up, uncertain. "I didn't do anything. You survived," he said simply. "That's the start of everything." Around them, laughter broke out, rough, honest laughter. Ghost was teasing Rooster about his cooking. Dank was polishing his ride with a rag that had seen better years. It wasn't chaos. It was home, the kind born out of scars and second chances. Clara felt something she hadn't felt since childhood, belonging. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Wyatt looked toward the horizon, where the town lights blinked like tired eyes. "Now, we make sure no girl in Hollow Bend ever hits the dirt again without 20 engines answering the call." By dawn, news had spread. Bobby Crane was gone. His father shipped him off to military discipline, though everyone knew it was exile wrapped in shame. Clara didn't care where he went. She cared that no one else would take his place. She stood outside the roost, watching the angels gear up for their morning ride. Reverend approached, handing her a helmet. "Yours now," he said. She blinked. "I don't even ride," he smiled. "You will." The rest of the crew cheered softly, genuine and proud. As she fastened the strap, the reflection of sunrise painted the chrome in gold. "Where are we going?" she asked. Wyatt looked down the open road. "Wherever someone thinks the weak are alone." When the engines roared to life, it wasn't just sound. It was promise. Thunder, born of loyalty. Clara climbed onto the back of Reverend's Harley, her hand steady on his vest. The wind caught her hair as they rolled forward, sunlight breaking over the hills. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running from pain. She was riding with strength. A week passed, and Hollow Bend felt like a different town. The silence that once hid cruelty was now charged with awareness. Folks at the cafe whispered about the angels. Some called them trouble, others called them salvation. Lara, meanwhile, had started sweeping floors at Rickson's garage, the same place that once refused to hire her for being too fragile. Now she showed up each morning wearing a borrowed angel's hoodie, chin high, eyes forward. When Reverend came by to check in, the owner greeted him with a handshake and free coffee. "Guess your name carries weight now," Clara teased. Reverend smiled faintly. "Names don't carry it, actions do." She looked down at her hands, oil-stained but steady. "Feels good to build something instead of break." He nodded. "You're part of this now, whether you ride or not." Across the street, 2 young girls watched from a bus stop, whispering and smiling at her. For the first time in her life, Clara realized what hope looked like. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, consistent, and alive. That evening, the angels gathered for their weekly meet at the quarry. The sky stretched wide and amber as bikes lined up in perfect symmetry. Clara sat beside Ghost on a tailgate, eating chips and listening to the low hum of conversations. "You ever think about where you'd be if they hadn't shown up that night?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "I try not to. That's a story I already survived." Ghost smirked. "Fair." He paused, his tone softening. "Reverend says you've got grit. You ever think of riding yourself?" The thought startled her, but it didn't scare her. "I don't know how." "Then we teach you." Ghost grinned. "Out here, freedom's a skill, not a gift." Reverend overheard and nodded. "We start tomorrow." The air buzzed with engines warming up, and the desert glowed orange in the dying light. Clara looked around at the circle of riders, their laughter, their scars, their shared code, and realized something powerful. The road wasn't just escape anymore. It was rebirth. Learning wasn't easy. The first morning she stalled the bike 3 times before she even left the yard. "You're fighting it," Reverend said, his voice calm. "You can't force balance. You feel it." He guided her hands over the grips, his own steady and sure. "Now breathe. Let it talk to you." Clara exhaled, feeling the vibration of the machine under her palms. The moment the clutch released, the bike moved forward, smooth, alive, responsive. Wind brushed her face as gravel turned to open dirt road. Ghost whooped behind her, raising his fist. "That's it, kid!" Clara laughed, a sound she didn't recognize at first. It was raw, unguarded, free. When she stopped, she turned to Reverend. "I did it." He nodded once. "Yeah, you did." The others cheered, not for skill, but for courage. Clara stood taller that day, no longer the girl dragged through mud, but a rider finding her own rhythm. Every turn of the wheel whispered the same truth. Pain doesn't vanish, it transforms. Weeks later, Clara rode at the back of the convoy, her first official ride. The air shimmered with heat, the asphalt stretching endless ahead. The angels weren't chasing vengeance, they were delivering aid. Blankets, food, supplies to a trailer park hit by layoffs and dust storms. Reverend led from the front, his head high, the chrome glinting like sunlight off armor. At the camp, families came out to greet them, weary but smiling. Clara helped a young mother fix a flat stroller tire, then handed her a bag of groceries. The woman's eyes welled up. "You one of them angels?" she asked softly. Clara hesitated, then smiled. "I guess I am." That night, around the fire, Reverend looked at her across the flames. "You found your road yet?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think it found me." Around them, the others nodded in quiet agreement. For the first time, she didn't feel like a guest among them. She was part of the roar, part of the brotherhood that healed in motion. But peace, like the open road, never lasts untested. One night, Ghost burst through the clubhouse doors, face tense. "Crane's back," he said. The room stilled. Reverend looked up slowly. "The son or the father?" "Both," Ghost said. "And they've been asking about her." Clara froze, coffee mug halfway to her lips. Reverend's expression didn't change. "Let them ask," he said evenly. "We don't run." Tank cracked his knuckles. "You think they'll try something stupid?" Wyatt's gaze met Clara's. Men like that always do. She swallowed hard. "What do we do if they come?" Reverend's voice was calm, certain. "We remind them the road has eyes." That night, the angels prepped without panic, just quiet readiness, bikes fueled, radios checked, routes planned. Clara stood by her Harley, heart pounding. She'd thought her fight ended months ago. Now she understood the truth. Strength isn't what saves you once. It's what stays when the past comes knocking. The following evening, Hollow Bend's quiet hum broke under the sound of approaching engines, ones that didn't belong to the angels. Reverend watched from the garage bay, jaw tight, as two dark trucks rolled up Main Street. Gerald Crane climbed out first, arrogance in every step, flanked by his son Bobby, back from exile with fresh tattoos and the same poison in his grin. The townsfolk froze behind windows, pretending not to see. "I told you this wasn't over," Bobby sneered, his voice carrying. "You think your little charity rides make you heroes?" Reverend stepped forward, hands loose at his sides. "No," he said, "but they made her free." Bobby's smirk faltered when he saw Lara step out from behind the door, helmet in hand, leathers clean and patch gleaming faintly in the sun. "You got something to say?" she asked quietly. The whole street held its breath. "You ruined my life," he spat. "No," she replied. "You did that the night you forgot what being a man meant." Behind her, 20 Harleys growled to life, low, controlled, and waiting. The standoff stretched like wire ready to snap. Reverend didn't raise his voice or his weapon. He just stared until Bobby's confidence started to leak away. "You want a fight?" Reverend said evenly. "Pick one with someone your size." Tank stepped forward like a mountain given motion. Bobby's jaw tightened, his hands shook. "We'll call the cops," Gerald shouted. Reverend's laugh was dry. "We are the ones keeping this town from burning." Bobby lunged, rage drowning reason. He didn't get far. Ghost intercepted him mid-stride, twisting his arm until the bone threatened to snap. The crack of knuckles and gravel filled the silence. Bobby howled. Gerald backed away, stammering. This is assault." Reverend tilted his head. "No, this is consequence." Lara stood still, watching, not with fear, but finality. "Let him go," she said quietly. Ghost released him. Bobby crumpled in the dirt, staring up at her. "You think they'll always be here to protect you?" Lara knelt, her voice steady. "No. That's why I learned to ride." The road vibrated under 20 idling engines, each one a heartbeat for the voiceless. When the sheriff finally arrived, the dust had already settled. Bobby sat clutching his arm, Gerald red-faced and humiliated. Reverend didn't argue, he just told the truth. "We stepped in because no one else would." The sheriff, an old man who'd seen enough of Hollow Bend's secrets, nodded. "Ain't the first time those boys have hurt someone." He looked at Lara. "You pressing charges?" She hesitated, then met Reverend's eyes. "No," she said finally. "I'm done fighting him. I'm fighting for me now." Reverend's lips curved slightly. "Good answer." The sheriff hauled the Cranes away, and the angels stood silent, not triumphant, just grounded. Lara looked around at the men who had become her family and felt something shift inside. Justice wasn't about watching your enemies fall. It was about rising above the dirt they tried to bury you in. That night, she polished her Harley for the first time on her own. Every smear of chrome reflected not what she'd escaped, but what she'd become, unyielding, fearless, reborn. Weeks later, Hollow Bend celebrated its first-ever Ride for Shelter, an event Lara organized herself. Dozens of bikers from nearby chapters rolled in, their patches different, but their purpose the same, to raise funds for women's housing and self-defense programs. Children waved flags as the convoy roared down Main Street. A sound once feared now turned into pride. Lara led the front beside Reverend, the sun catching her mirrored visor. She no longer hid the scars on her hands. They were proof of survival. When they stopped, the mayor himself thanked her, voice trembling. "You turned pain into something this town needed." Reverend leaned over and whispered, "Told you the road had plans." Lara smiled. "Yeah, but I didn't know it had wings." That night, As music drifted across the fairgrounds and engines cooled under moonlight, she walked alone to the edge of town. The road stretched endlessly before her, black ribbon glistening under starlight. She whispered to it softly, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Months later, the angels gathered at dawn, ready to ride out. Clara stood among them, not behind, not beside, but with. The chapter patch on her vest was new, stitched in red and white. Iron Valley Angels, Sister Chapter. Reverend handed her a set of keys. "You earned this road, Clara," he said. "Make it count." She nodded, tears glinting in the sunrise. As the engines fired, the world filled with the sound of thunder and redemption. The convoy rolled toward the horizon, dust curling behind like smoke from a prayer. In the wind, Clara heard the echo of every woman who'd ever been silenced, every soul that had clawed its way back to freedom. The girl who once crawled through mud now rode with angels. And somewhere beyond the hills, justice kept watch, not in courthouses or headlines, but on the open road. If this story stirred something in your heart, if you believe kindness can roar louder than cruelty, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Because here, every mile we ride reminds us, even in the darkest places, angels still keep watch on two wheels.